What's up, football world? I am Bucky Brooks. This is the Bucky Brooks Show. And look, if you came in to hear about all the NFL, you're going to have to go somewhere else for that because today is a Jaguars only podcast. We're going to talk about the Jaguars, what's going down, why the hottest team in the league is on fire. Trevor Lawrence should be the MVP, and just what Liam Coen and this staff has done to get this team up and running. But before we get into all of that, let's talk about these Jaguars and how these Jaguars are sitting at 11-4, primed and ready, first in the division, and really well positioned to maybe secure the number one seed in the AFC and to make a run. That's right. I never thought that I would say this, but literally a run at the Super Bowl. And if you go to FanDuel Sportsbook right now, you can lay some odds on the Jaguars. Right now, they're +1, +1,400 to make the Super Bowl. And right now, based on what I saw on Sunday, I would jump all over that because this is the best team in the AFC, and they are balling out of control. And a lot of that is due to Trevor Lawrence. And Trevor Lawrence is playing at an MVP right now. If we had to stop the presses and say who's the MVP in the league, I know we have the sentimental favorite in Matthew Stafford. We have the new school favorite in Drake May because the Patriots have gotten off the map. But I think we can make a reasonable case for Trevor Lawrence to be the MVP. And I'm just looking at these numbers, and I'm looking at the numbers the first 12 weeks of the season. Trevor Lawrence was averaging 218.8 pass yards per game, 19 touchdowns, 11 interceptions, 79.4 passer rating. That is probably mid to the bottom of the pack when it came to NFL quarterbacks. But since week 13, Trevor Lawrence is averaging 270.5 pass yards per game, 14 touchdowns, no interceptions, 120.8 passer rating. And when we just kind of use the eyeballs and look at how he's performed, he is performing like he's the best quarterback in the league. And when you go and you systematically dismantle the Denver Broncos, a team that people were talking about maybe an all-time great defense, I think now you got to stand up and take notice in terms of what Trevor Lawrence is doing. And looking at the numbers from the game, look, I would say this like being field level: 23 for 36, 279, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, passer rating of 115. And even though he took 5 sacks, he got some of those yards back with 6 rushes for 20 yards and a touchdown. People will say, oh, this is the best that we've seen Trevor Lawrence. But I've kind of been on this kick, and I've said it whenever I had an opportunity. Look, man, Trevor has been playing at a high level since the Arizona Cardinal game. And in case you hadn't been really paying close attention to the Jaguars, what happened during the Arizona Cardinal game? Well, Trevor had 4 turnovers. But prior to that game, Liam Coen had a one-on-one conversation with Trevor Lawrence where he encouraged him. And the quote is, let it rip. Don't play scared. Don't worry about the mistakes. Let it rip. Be aggressive. Be decisive. Don't be reckless. But, man, if you see it, throw it, and we can live with the result. Now, immediately after that game, he had a lot of turnovers. But on the field, I can tell you it felt differently because he never blinked despite the miscues. He was aggressive. He was decisive. He threw a touch timing in anticipation. He let it go. He trusted his wide receivers to get to their spots. And all of that has changed this Jaguars offense. And from that point on, he has been terrific. Now, people are talking about, oh, they play some bad defenses and those things. And that's true. But here's what you're supposed to do when you play bad defenses. You're supposed to carve them up and shred them, which is what he's done. I told you since week 13, 14 touchdowns, no interceptions, passer rating well over 120. And he is exhibiting all of the traits that you've wanted to see from a former number 1 overall pick. There are a lot of people that are wondering, well, why did it take so long? Why in year 5 is he just now beginning to realize his potential? And I will say this quite simply: multiple coaches, multiple play callers, multiple schemes, not a lot of confidence internally and externally in terms of what he was doing and what he was being asked to do, and it impacted his play. This Trevor doesn't care. The maturity is there where he really doesn't care the outside opinion, the outside noise. He's really locked in and focused and having a lot of fun. In fact, having watched Trevor since he was in high school, I would say this is probably the most, and I have to phrase this right, the most competitive arrogance that I've seen him display in a long, long time, going back to his Clemson days. And what I mean by competitive arrogance, I mean, that you walk into the field knowing that you're going to do great things, that you're going to dominate the competition. You're a competitor, but you still feel like you have that thing that no matter who you play, who you're up against, you're going to find a way to dominate, and you're going to dominate in a high level. Well, that's what Trevor has been doing. Now, when it comes to quarterbacks, young quarterbacks in particular, there's a formula and a recipe that has been talked about for a long time in terms of how you get young quarterbacks to play at their best. And we talk about it like it comes down to the P's. It comes down to the three P's. And the P's are play caller, playmakers, and protectors. That's basically the three elements that you have to have around the quarterback to get him to play at a high level. So now let's break down what the Jaguars have done in terms of helping Trevor Lawrence play at that high level. Well, one, Liam Coen taking the job in the offseason has been everything. Liam Coen was coming off a one-year stint as offensive coordinator for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Baker Mayfield had played at a high level. I mean, probably the best football that we've ever seen Baker Mayfield play. He did that. Liam was a big part of that. They changed what they were doing mid-year in the run game and those things, and Baker Mayfield took off. I think he had 40 touchdowns and really looked like the number one overall pick that entered the league from Oklahoma. Well, Liam Coen has gotten his bag and done it all over again. And it took a bit of a process from spring to summer to the early part of training camp, preseason, regular season before it clicked. Early, I can tell you, I mean, it's out there now, but early, a big part of what Liam was doing is he wanted Trevor to play kind of what I call like new age quarterback, meaning Liam's play calls are verbose, a lot of verbiage. You may have 10, 12, 13, 14 words in a play call, and they're always 2 plays on every call, meaning that Trevor can go to the line, he can look at the defense, and based on what the defense is aligned in, he makes a call to either stay in the first call that was given in the huddle, or they can kill it. Sometimes you see them do this, and they'll go to the second call that was called in the huddle. Sometimes that's a run, sometimes it's another pass, and then he always has the ability to audible and those things. Well, that's a lot of verbiage, and that's a lot of things to kind of process and kind of play out, particularly when he didn't operate like that previously. The other part of it, because the play calls are so verbose and they have so many words, and everyone is hanging on every word because it means what a person does with the job, like their job, because everything is very descriptive. That is a lot of memorization for the quarterback when it comes to it. Well, early, Liam had talked about, there was a debate about whether Trevor Lawrence should use a wristband or not use a wristband and those things, because Liam has never been a wristband guy, doesn't really like the wristband, as he told me and told a group in a meeting. When I call the play and the words are coming out of my mouth, I can visualize what is going on. In the past, when he tried to operate off a wristband, look, I can say, hey, orange 5, but orange 5 to me still doesn't allow me to visualize what's going on. The problem is when you have quarterbacks who are very comfortable in today's game being on the wristband because they've always operated off a wristband from middle school to high school to college, it is hard for them sometimes to just rely on memorization to get everything right. Also, if you don't memorize it right, you miscall things, you put things out of sequence, it impacts the huddle. Early in the year, this played out because Jaguars had a lot of pre-snap penalties, a lot of illegal formations, illegal shifts, pre-snap penalties that were just egregious and very costly. Well, right about the middle of the year, they kind of had an agreement where Trevor started putting on the wristband. And I distinctly remember, I can't remember which game exactly, but I do remember seeing like, oh, Trevor has a wristband on. And what it did is it cleaned up a lot of the communication, because now instead of Trevor have to memorize exactly what Liam is saying in the thing, he can look down, he can read it to the people in the huddle, that they can get lined up and everyone knows exactly where to go. So it just kind of streamlined the process a little bit. Now, initially they talked about only using the wristband in red zone and third down, those things, the high leverage plays. But it appears to me that they may be operating on the wristband a little more than that. So Liam met Trevor halfway, and that has helped Trevor play with more confidence in those things because he knows exactly what the plays are going in and out and handling that. But it goes beyond that part of it. Liam, and maybe making that into 2 examples I gave you, one in terms of telling him to let it rip, 2 in terms of meeting him halfway with the wristband, what he's done is he's shown confidence in the quarterback. Anytime you have a situation where it's more of a partnership, that means that if you're going to be my partner, have enough confidence that you're going to be able to do what we want to get accomplished. And so that confidence that I have in you allows you to boldly go forward and do those things. I can say Liam has really pumped number 16 full of confidence. And that has been a big part of why he's having success, because when the play caller believes in me, when the quarterback, coach, the head coach, or whatever believes in me, in my talent, in my ability to get it done, there's just an empowering feeling that can help you take your game to another level. And so when you couple the newfound confidence with a creative schemer who is drawing up these plays that are really making the game easy for Trevor to not only create mismatches, but exploit mismatches, now you're seeing a quarterback who not only has this newfound confidence and has been told to play aggressively, he has now been given plays that allows him to play boldly, because the X's and O's create these easy opportunities for Trevor. And so we're seeing all of this come together in real time. And it has led to, I would say, a performance and a production explosion from a quarterback that we've seen it do it in flashes, but not consistently. Confidence, creativity has done it. Scheme diversity has helped, because now they're putting the ball in the hands of a bunch of different playmakers. They're taxing the defense in a bunch of different ways. And I will say this in knowing Liam very closely, man, he relishes the opportunity to bust up defensive rules, to put defensive coordinators and defenders in binds, and to really play a game of, when I was little, we used to call it pickle, a game of pickle with the quarterback and the pass catcher really taking advantage of whatever the defender is doing. There's no way he can be right. And as a result, we're seeing Trevor just find completions and big plays on what I say easy for the offense, hard for the defense to defend. And we saw it over and over again, particularly when you look at the red zone against the Broncos. From an X and O standpoint, they really busted up the Broncos scheme and allowed Trevor to generate some touchdowns on things that were very, very easy for him to execute, which is exactly what you want to see. But it goes beyond the play caller. It goes to the playmakers. Going into the year, it was funny because the expectation was that we were going to see Travis Hunter and Brian Thomas Jr. and De'Ami Brown. They were going to have this high-powered offense because they had speed that could push it down the field. They had playmakers that could run around and make plays. They invested in the position in those things. Lo and behold, we reached the midway point, and none of that was necessarily working. Travis was still trying to find his way as a two-way player. De'Ami Brown had been a bit of a disappointment because he just hadn't delivered the big plays that you thought. And on top of that, like Brian Thomas Jr. was struggling when it came to catching the ball, and kind of the sophomore slump had kind of taken over. Well, then you decide shortly after playing the Las Vegas Raiders that, hey, man, we need to bring in someone who can give us the consistency on the perimeter that we need that will help the quarterback. And so that's Jakobi Meyers. It coincided with a nice run that we saw from Parker Washington, where he was beginning to step up and make plays. And as someone who could work in the slot or outside, he was a guy that was very comfortable for Trevor to target, because Trevor knew inside the numbers, I could throw to number 11 and he would make the play. Now you bring in Jakobi Meyers, and so now there's another player, number 3, who can go over the middle and make the plays on in-breaking routes in the traffic, like in the congested areas, but the areas where there's a lot of hidden yardage. So by putting Parker Washington in, acquiring Jakobi Meyers, moving Brian Thomas Jr. maybe into a role that better fits his skill set as a vertical playmaker or someone that are catching more outbreaking throws away from the traffic, and then getting Bretton Strange back, you now have fully built out a receiving core with guys who are kind of slotted in roles that not only plays to the strengths of their game, but the collective plays to the strength of the quarterback's game. And I think it's also important to mention Travis Etienne as one of those playmakers, because what he does out of the backfield really allows the Jaguars to stretch the defense horizontally with swings and screens, rail shots, push the ball down the field to Brian Thomas Jr. On those one-on-one occasions when he's isolated and you love the matchup. And then moving the chains with Parker Washington, Jakobi Meyers, and Bretton Strange kind of operating as the designated chain movers over the middle of the field. The reason why that was important was not only for that middle stretch, but for games like this against the Denver Broncos, where you have a defense that has a number one corner in Pat Surtain, a guy who can snuff out your wide receiver one and force you to work on the complementary parts of your offense. Well, that's exactly what happened, because in the game, the Denver Broncos matched up Pat Surtain on Brian Thomas Jr. He traveled all around the field and shadowed him. That left Parker Washington, Jacoby Myers to deal with the other defensive backs, Riley Moss in particular, to see if they could win. Early in the game, the sticky coverage from the Broncos were winning. Like they couldn't get open. You didn't see a lot of wide open receivers. Trevor Lawrence was having to battle a pass rush that was in his face, and he just didn't have enough. And it just felt like a very, very chaotic feel to it. Somewhere in the middle of that second quarter, Liam and the coaches kind of dialed in, and they found some things that allowed them to have some easier completions for Trevor Lawrence. First, it happened where Trevor was able to escape the pocket and make some things on scramble plays. But then it became a thing where they were able to kind of condense the formations, use some motions, use some bunches, use some stacks to get rub routes to just create space and free access for the wide receivers to run free. You saw Parker Washington catch some speed outs on the outside. You saw Bretton Strange and Travis Etienne catch some things out on the flat where they were wide open because they tested and challenged the rules of the defense based on their alignment and then their deployment where they ended up. That allowed Trevor to begin to get into a rhythm the third and fourth quarter, where you saw a lot of big plays, namely from Parker Washington on catch and run things that were high completion percentage passes, low risk, big reward, because he caught the ball in the flat, made a guy miss, and a 5-yard pass becomes a 50, 60-yard gain just because of the lack of execution when it came to tackling on the perimeter. That was huge, because the one thing that was holding this team back, or the biggest question about this team, was what were they going to play like when they had to play a team that could bully them and could present a defense that could pressure them and also cover them on the outside while taking away the running game. Denver was able to do all of those things. And the performance, Trevor responded well. We saw the 3 touchdowns. We saw the 279 passing yards and those things. And the efficiency that they operated with was everything. But the final piece of it, play callers, playmakers, protectors. This offensive line, and it wasn't a great performance in terms of like they gave 5 sacks up. And a lot of it was being at home or being on the road, dealing with that crowd at Empower Field. It was loud, it was raucous, it was noisy. They were very intentional about disrupting the huddle, which made for a very, very long and difficult day for the Jaguars in terms of just trying to figure out the lay of the land, especially in the first quarter when they were at their best. I'm going to tell you, I had noise canceling headphones on. You can just feel the vibrations in the stadium. But Cole Van Landen has been great for the Jaguars. And the reason why he's been great is because early in the year, he was a backup player that could play anywhere on the front. Right tackle, right guard. If you needed to kick him out to left tackle, he could do all those things. Well, it got to the point that he was playing so well and he was so consistent in his execution that you needed to kind of find a way for him to be on the field all the time. Walker Little provided that opening with an injury and then a last-minute headache that allowed Cole Van Landen to go to left tackle, and, man, he played terrific. And in that game where they needed someone that could hold up on their own, Cole Van Landen has been the biggest surprise, and he's been that surprise that has done that for like the last 6 or 7 weeks. There was an injury to Patrick McCurry, would put Walker Little back in the game at right guard, a position that maybe he wouldn't initially appreciate or approve of playing inside, but for the betterment of the team, and because Cole Van Landen has been so good, he played guard. And I'm going to say this, the unit looked really, really good. They were solid. Despite the sacks and despite like the quarterback hits and the pressures, they held up really well. And you have to understand it as you're judging the offensive line's performance on the curve. Remember, the Broncos were on pace to have 70 sacks on the year. This is what they do. They bring pressure from everywhere. They blitz. They come at you. They're creative. They're aggressive. And so you knew the number 16 was going to hit a little bit. But in the end, when it mattered, the offensive line held up. So part of the reason why Trevor's playing so great is because offensively, the play caller, the playmakers, and the protectors are all playing well, and that has allowed number 16 to play at an MVP level. But if you've been looking at the Jags, their success is far more than just number 16 playing at an MVP level. You have to look at the way this team has embraced complementary football, which means offense, defense, special teams working together to get wins. So on any given day, if the defense is balling, you may scale back some of what you do on offense because the defense has the game under control and the other team just can't hit a number that you feel like will force you out of your conservative style on offense. It might mean on special teams, hey, we're delivering big plays. We're consistently getting the ball out to the 40 on kickoffs, or Parker Washington's taking punts back, and we have that under control. The defense is playing, so offensively we can do it. Or defense is struggling, but we need more explosive plays. So in the kicking game, you dial one up to go with the offense, push the ball down the field, or whatever. But whatever it is and what is required, the Jaguars are able to do it because their complementary football style is really working. And one of the reasons it's working is because defensively, first-year defensive coordinator Anthony Campanili has his unit playing at a high level. And the funny thing I can tell you after watching 5 years of Jaguars football, I wish I could tell you it was complex. It was something that, man, you need to go and dig into an encyclopedia to see what they're doing. But honestly, what they're doing is pretty simple when you study it. It is simple for them, hard for the opponent, but it's working. And one of the things of late that they've been doing is they've been moving Trayvon Walker around, meaning that he plays outside primarily, but when it's a money down and passing down, he has been going inside, playing a technique where he can work over the guard. If you look at the construction of the offensive line, a lot of times the weakest link on the offensive line is inside. And the reason why guards can be the weak links is because they're protected by their neighbors, the center and the tackle. They can protect them. So you have a limited amount of space that you're working with. And so it takes a lot to get beat on the inside when you know that you have body help or real help from your center or your tackle to the right and to the left of you. Trayvon Walker blows all that up because he is a rare find as a outside rusher who has tremendous power and strength, and he can drive people back into the quarterback's lap. And what that does is that changes the composition of the pocket, and it makes it where the quarterback is uncomfortable stepping up, but he can't run outside because Josh Hines Allen is on one side, being able to kind of keep you pinned inside. Trayvon Walker's movement inside has now given the Jaguars what every team wants, which is one outside rusher, one inside rusher, so you can just prevent the quarterback from being very, very comfortable throwing from the depth of the pocket. Trayvon Walker's move has everything, because what it did is it disrupted Bo Nix, and the numbers won't necessarily reflect that. Bo Nix had well over 300 yards, did a really good job for most of the day being a thorn in the side of the defense because his athleticism, his improvisational skills, his scrambling ability really, really made it difficult to kind of keep him under wraps. And there was a stretch there from the second to third quarter. He was on fire, finding guys, pushing the ball down the field, making plays and those things. But when it mattered most in the fourth quarter, the Jaguars were able to get stops because the accumulation of the pass rush disrupted his rhythm, threw off his timing, and he never could settle in when they needed him to be at his best. The other part of it, when he started getting hit a little bit, not a lot, just a little bit, it changes the timing, quickens the internal clock in your head, and that leads to errant throws and bad decisions and those things. In the late stages of the game, you saw a couple of things. You saw the Broncos have a fumble on a mesh. He messed it up. But you also saw stops and takeaways. The Jags were able to stop him a couple of times in the fourth quarter, and then he got a great takeaway. I think Jerry Jones picked off a pass down the boundary. They were in a two-shell coverage. It was fourth and whatever. He had to force it up, but he threw an interception. Anthony Campanili is responsible for all of that because, one, the move with Trayvon Walker, but the other part is what they've done in the secondary. See, this secondary is young, but, man, they've really settled in. And I'm going to give a lot of credit to Ron Mollis in the back end because I see what he does with those guys. But Buster Brown, Monteric Brown on one side, you had Jarian Jones playing on the other side after Greg Newsome got hurt. You have Jordan Lewis on the inside. Greg Newsome pops in and out depending on his availability with injuries and those things. But in the back end, you're getting really great efforts from Antonio Johnson, Dewey, Eric Murray, and all of these guys are rotating in. Even saw Christian Braswell have to play a couple snaps. And what the Jaguars have done is they've improved because they're consistent in what they're asking their guys to do each week. I can tell you sitting on the couch, if you're watching the game, the number one thing the Jaguars want to take away is no explosives, no big plays, nothing over the top of the defense, those things. Now, they gave us some explosive plays to the Broncos on Sunday. Cortland Sutton had a big one. I think Franklin caught a deep over in coverage. But for the most part, when the Jaguars are dialed in, they're not giving up those big plays. And if you look at the stats in the National Football League, there's a direct correlation between explosive plays and points. And because the Jaguars aren't giving up explosive plays, they're not giving up a bunch of points, which is why they're third or fourth in scoring defense, and a big part of why they only gave up 20 points to the Broncos. Young secondary, scrappy, they tackle well on the perimeter, but more importantly, they're executing the zones and the vision and break concepts that they have put in. And putting their eyes on the quarterback and playing more zone, they're able to get their hands on balls, but more importantly, they're able to keep everything in front and limit some of the big plays that victimized the team a year ago. To me, what Anthony Campanili has done is not only work on simplifying everything where these guys can execute it at a high level, but he's put the premium more on, man, effort and energy. Can you run to the ball hard? Can you be energetic? And can you play with that for 60 minutes? And in listening to them and watching their interactions, they're all in on that. Final thing I'm going to say about the Jags and why everyone around Duval should be really excited about this version of the Jags. I can say this throughout the time. In big games, a lot of times you'll see these emotions go up and down. Our team makes a play, we'll see the sideline go up. Our team gives up a play, we'll see the sideline go down, and everyone's dropped, shoulder slumped. At no point did I see any of those reactions from the team. I can tell you that this team operates at this level. They're not impacted by the scoreboard. They're not impacted by circumstance and situation. They're just playing the game. And I know a lot of times we hear coach speak about, hey, this is the most important game. We're going to focus on this, next play up, next play mentality, yada, yada, yada. But I am telling you, this team is really dialed in to playing the moment that is right in front of them and not allowing the game to get too big for them. I can tell you early in the year, sometimes those moments would get big for them and you would see these emotional swings. But as this team spends more time with their head coach and as they spend more time playing together, they've kind of flushed out all of that. Even after the game, where you thought it would be like a Chuck E. Cheese party and balloons and celebrations, it wasn't that. There was some excitement for winning, but it wasn't like it was a hat and T-shirt game where they were celebrating as if they won the championship. A big part of being a good team or even a great team is beginning to have a level of expectations where, hey, we expect to win. We expect to win because our preparation and our process is going to put us in a position to win these games because we know exactly what we're doing. We know how to do it, and we're going to do it when we're expected to do it. The Jaguars are at that point, and because they're at that point, they're the best team in the AFC, and they got a really good chance to make it to Santa Clara. So that's the show for today. I'm Bucky Brooks. This is the Bucky Brooks Show. Make sure you come back. We'll talk next time more than Jaguars, but I had to get it off my chest, man. It has been a minute since my Jags have been good, so we want to make sure that we lean into that because I know Duval is ready, and the game coming up against the Indianapolis Colts gives them a chance to take one step closer to the division. And maybe your boy get a hat and T-shirt after that one to commemorate winning the AFC South. Until next time, I'm Bucky Brooks. We'll talk to you.